Thank you. To begin with, I would like to pass through the WHO definition of health. And health, it doesn't mean that you escape having a disease or a handicap. It is defined by the WHO as a state of a total mental, social, as well as physical well-being. Now we get into the quality of life as well. Quality of life is a phrase used to refer to an individual's total well-being. And it has got a sector where we look into the emotional as well as the social and the physical aspect of the quality of life. It has got different branches, and looking into, in general, every box contains positive self-imaging, good health, supportive relationship, and it is broad spectrum definition. When we introduce quality of life in healthcare, when we get into medicine and healthcare, we refer to as health-related quality of life, and that can be defined as how the individual's well-being is going to be affected or impacted over time by disease, disability, or disorders. So when we get further into health-related quality of life, it is multidimensional factors, so we have to go through the 3 factors, including the physical, social, emotional, cognitive, work-related, and spiritual, and these can be defined further into different sectors. When we look here, there is a growing field of research concerned with the developing and evaluating and applying the quality of life in the healthcare. We can see that very obvious and clear in the randomized clinical controlled studies. And as well, when we find that why we have this health-related quality of life in the healthcare. Because looking into these growing researches, we have to get the decision-making agencies to use the health-related quality of life to make a better sort of selection and treatment. So we find that the Food and Drug Administration, European Medicine Agency, National Institute of Clinical Excellence. So they use the health-related quality of life to provide a better health care. And we, as well, we find the health-related quality of life can be assisting as a final step in the clinical trials. And if we look into the health care providers all the time, they have to play the equation of the cost-benefit analysis. And as well, the health-related quality of life can be applied in the alternative medicine, as just to see the rationale of using it as a preventive medicine or as a final decision for treatment. And health-related quality of life as well can be used to define a better status for chronic and terminal illnesses. Why? This is the way we can use it in the symptoms management, adaptive technology, as well as palliative care. So what is it used for? So we have got 2 options here. Looking into the past history or the past results, we can use the health-related quality of life to select for us option of treatment. But if we look into the longitudinal studies and surveys where we can have the studies of before, during, and after treatment, here we will be able to use the best option plan if you use the health-related quality of life as a modality of the selection. Now, because we want to address the stent side, what is a stent? Urological device, maintain open passage from the kidney to the bladder. And these are types of stents, and just at least to show you some of you are all aware of that. Why we use stents? We use stents for deobstruction in case of stone tumor renal failure, as well as protective and stomatic as repair surgeries or transplant, prophylactic in case of ESWL, complicated ureteroscopies, and intraoperative identification to help the identification of the ureter during gynecological and rectosigmoidal as well as aortic surgeries. We pass quickly through the types of material used in the stent. We have got the polymeric, metallic, and biodegradable, and all you are aware of that. We need to address why we care about the stent coating in relation to quality of life, with the stent, because we're looking into improving the function. The type of the coating can help with the coefficient of friction, ease of insertion, biocompatibility, and we need to improve the patient tolerance and minimize the incidence of complication having infection, biofilm, and incrustation. And this is how the coating, it has got a place in rationalizing, the type of the quality of life in relation to having a stent. How the stent is designed can help us. It helps to improve the patient comfort, the stent handling, and reduce the incidence of UTI, urinary tract infection. So having the ureteric stent, you can have it temporary or you can have it a long term. It depends on the indication. But once you have the stent, definitely you will have a morbidity. And then looking into the morbidity, starting from infection, incrustation, migration, hyperplasia, lower urinary tract symptoms, and then we go into details on that, renal pain, patient discomfort, and reduced quality of life and utility value. Passing through the history of having a validated sort of term on dealing with the evaluation of the impact of the ureteric stent, we pass through a validated questionnaire. There is one study, Josh et al., where they have looked into the IPSS, International Continence. So they use all these sort of validated questionnaire to determine the impact of having a stent into the patient's quality of life. But having used this validated questionnaire, they showed the association of the lower urinary tract symptoms with the stent and the impact on the quality of life. But they failed as well to bring to attention the need for the development of a stent-specific tool, a stent-specific tool here. So in that case, further studies has been carried out where we find Dr. Anthony Temoni and co-workers in South Smith Hospital, Bristol, UK. They came with the ureteric stent symptoms questionnaire, where they want to have, in order to have a better orient clinical decision-making to practice regarding the quality of life studies in relation to stents. Further, we go into the ureteric stent symptoms questionnaire. You find it as multidimensional measure, consists of 38 items and measure about 6 sections. Here, lower urinary tract symptoms, we go that in detail later on. Pain, general health, work performance, sexual matters, and additional problems. Further, to analyze the ureteric symptoms questionnaire, it is a psychometrically valid measure because it's sensitive and reliable instrument to evaluate the symptoms and the impact on quality of life of any ureteric stent. But at the same time, it can evaluate and measure and compare the symptoms and the impact on quality of life between different stents. So this is why the ureteric stent symptoms questionnaire is valid. Different studies have been carried out where they analyze the domain prevalences. So the lower urinary tract symptoms is 76, pain is 70, sexual problems, and we get into additional help, daily activities, seek additional assistance from the medical side, and reduce work and performance. All these you can see the percentage. Going into the lower urinary tract symptoms, here we can see the irritable bladder, frequency, urgency, and we end up having incontinence, hematuria, and then pain as well, and reduced physical activity. So the other thing is that the other issue is the issue with the sexual side, where we can find dyspareunias, we can find loss of libido, and as well as problems with the erectile dysfunction. Ureteric stent symptom questionnaire, other studies being carried out where there is a study has compared between the conventional JJ stent, whether to use it or the thermoexpandable, and this one has been carried out under Mr. Buckel's care, where they found that the MemoCast group showed improvement in pain, lower urinary tract symptoms, general health, light and heavy activities, and if there is any future insertion. And this is highly possible it might be due to the short segmental for the MemoCast stent rather than having the loops below as well as the in the kidney. Going further, another study is a post-procedure effect of a JJ stent ends. And this one, they have got two groups where group one with a longer stent, they want to predict the cause of pain, upper end of the upper calyx. The upper end of the JJ stent ending in the upper calyx, and the distal loop crosses the midline of the bladder. That means it passes through the UJ. And the group 2, proximal end in the renal pelvis and the distal end just beyond the VUJ. Looking here into the pain side, there isn't any big differences. The flank pain was not affected by the length of the stent, but we can find the other three, the dysuria, urgency, worse quality of life, all being affected by the length, because this is in relation to the distal end of the JJ stent. If it passes the midline, it causes lots of irritation. So stent morbidity and the impact on quality of life. Here we have got 135 patients in lateral stent, and then we go into the study itself. It's more elaborated, where you can see the different percentages starting from the lower urinary tract symptoms, irritable bladder, dysuria, frequency, urgency, and pass-through. And it can tell you exactly how this patient has been impacted with having a JJ stent. Looking into here, that we need to have an ideal ureteric stent, at least to minimize the morbidity. So we have to look into the optimal flow characteristic, good patient tolerance, biocompatibility, radio opacity, visibility on ultras, ease of insertion and removal, and resistance to infection, as well as corrosion and incrustation. And to do that, and to improve the quality of life in relation to ureteric stent, is that we need to do more researches in stent design, stent composition and material, and stent coating. And we are still searching for the ideal stent. Thank you very much.